everyone. Welcome to MetalNet. I am excited to have my guest, Militia Vox of Judas Priestess. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Sarah.
Yay, this is going to be fun. So I just want to get right into it and ask you some questions about Judas Priestess. And my first question is, when you guys first got together, because you guys have been together for a while now, but when you first got together, was it a group of musicians that wanted to play together and said, hey, we all love Judas Priest, let's be a cover band? Or did somebody have the idea of doing a Judas Priest cover band and then start pulling together musicians?
It was kind of A and B. Our original guitarist and our bassist, Gita Gash, met at some, like, they were part of like other tribute bands at the time, all girl tribute bands. And you know, cool kids kind of find each other and they recognize each other, like, oh, she's cool, like she's someone I could play with or whatever. So they noticed each other and they're like, oh, we should do something, you know, something really kick-ass to like make a statement, you know, to really come out, you know, with like a bold image of women musicians. And they had tossed around a couple ideas, one of which was Black Sabbath, but they were kind of like, Black Sabbath gets covered all the time, you know, even though we love the music. And then the guitarist was like, no, we should do Judas Priest. And like Gita was like, oh shit, like that would be amazing. And then it turned out like no one was doing it. So they took it and ran. And they took their time to like find the right girls, like find the right ladies to do it. Our other second guitar player was kind of like someone that was just coming up in the scene, so she was real new, but she was hungry, you know. So she added like this like very youthful aspect to the band. And then our drummer, she had been like in the scene for a while and playing in other all-female metal bands, original ones, like in the New York, New Jersey area, like L'Amour's and the Pony and all kinds of stuff like that. And she was looking for something. Like she actually told me this story about how she was like walking on the beach one day and she like asked like a higher power, like if she was supposed to be done with drumming, like maybe this is it, but if there was something more for her to do on the drums, like show me. And Judas Priestess happened, like, so, and came to her, so like that was pretty amazing. She conjured it. And it was really, the last piece was May, like the last piece was the singer, so they had been rehearsing for a while before they even considered bringing in a vocalist, because they knew that whoever was going to do the job, you know, really had big boots to fill. So I had heard about it through the grapevine, through an ex, and he was like, man, there's this all girl Judas Priest tribute, and like he knew I liked Priest, and I was like, man, they probably suck. Like, I don't know, man, they probably suck. It's probably some stupid gimmick, you know, the same thing that everyone thinks when they hear of us anyway, you know, it's like I thought the exact same things. And I was like, oh, this is just some kind of stunt. They're not real Priest fans. They're not, you know, like all this shit. And he was like, but what if they are? He's like, what if they're really good and then some other girl is their singer and then you're going to wish that you did it? I was like, you're right. So I was like, well, fuck it. No harm, no foul, like in trying. So I reached out to them and I had been a Priest fan for years. So I sent them all these pictures of me with Rob Halford. Like,
how many times had you met him at that point?
3.
Nice.
So I was just like, you know, because I wanted them to see that I was the real deal and that I wasn't, you know, this wasn't like, oh, this will be fun or something cutesy or stupid, you know, like, that I actually was into the band was an important step. So they ended up like being really intimidated to bring me in.
Funny.
And they were like, oh no, like, oh, we can't get her, she's too good. She's too good, she's not gonna want to do this for real. And I think the first time I was supposed to come in, I canceled the meeting for some reason. I had something else come up, and so they were like, oh, she's not serious, you know.
Oh, no.
And then I eventually ended up coming in. I was serious. I don't even remember what the other thing was, but I came in and it was just one of those moments, boom. As soon as I walked into the room, I knew those were my sisters.
That's awesome.
We all knew immediately. It was really kind of crazy. And everyone was so different. It was like we were like fucking Power Rangers or something. Like we all had our different like superpower. It was really a meeting of like, superheroes from the jump. And that's why it worked. And that's why we came up very quickly, because not only were we unique and very strong in our own personalities in our own right, but we were also really kick-ass on our instruments, and we were out for blood at the jump, and we really wanted to knock down any walls or any bullshit. So we knew we had something special from the beginning. And also, like, and I don't know if people realize it, but we're also a multi-generational band. So like, at the time, one of our guitar players, like when we started, she was in her 20s. I was 30, I think, at the time. And then the drummer was like in her 40s, and then the two older members were like in their 50s and 60s.
Oh, wow. No, I actually didn't realize that. Because when you're on stage and I've only seen you online, and when you're watching videos, it's just like kick-ass women.
Yeah.
Music, right? You don't really even pick that up.
Yeah, I know it embarrasses them. They don't like it when we talk about age, but like I think it's fucking phenomenal, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah.
To be in a multi-generational band, because like everyone has so much insight, and it's like it ends up being a really exhilarating experience to have that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's amazing. I think that is something to be celebrated, because when you become a musician, I imagine you're not becoming a musician so you could play in your 20s and then retire by the time you turn 30. I mean, the idea is to be able to play music till you're stone cold dead and 6 feet under. So,
sure. Well, that was all, that was the red pill we decided to swallow. We said we were doing this and we were going to burn it to the ground. Like we were just going to go, we were going to take it to the fucking hilt. And that was the pact we made.
Okay, so you had intended when you started to just put everything into it and just make it happen. Because that was going to be my next question is, you're all really talented. You've all done original material and that, and you're coming together, and to put to invest your time into being in a great band with great musician makes sense, right? Getting people's attention totally makes sense, and you found a great way to do it. But I guess when I think of cover bands or anything like that, I always think of it as, for most people, side gig, if they have a day job, this is their side gig, or you get people's attention and then you go off to do other things. What's the value for you as a musician? You've been in this band for over a decade now, right? About 11-ish years or so. Right. Yeah. So what's the value for you, aside from that pact that you made way back when, what's the value of you to continue playing this music that you love, but that doesn't belong to you?
Because the gigs keep getting bigger. The checks get larger and the audience gets more packed. And there was a period where we were having a lot of transition and we couldn't find girls to play it. Like we were going through some lineup changes and we just couldn't find new women to like take the reins. It was really, really kind of devastating. Like we were like, okay, we guess this is over then. Like this was as far as we could go because we just can't find the band members. And then next thing we know, like all of a sudden we find someone who's amazing, and it's like we're saved. And then like, we give that a run, and then we just keep going. So like, our current lineup has been around for a long time. I'm trying to think, maybe 6 years or something like that, as this lineup, and it's been it's been wild. I mean, we're all family, so, and like I said, anytime we tried to lay the band down and like throw the dirt over it, we keep getting asked to play. So it's literally demand has kept us going. It's not because of our vanity or anything like that. It's just because like it just doesn't stop. It just like is relentless. And like you said, the gigs keep getting bigger. I mean, we assumed that 10 years was probably going to be the max. We actually didn't even think it would be that long.
Yeah.
But like to reach 10 years, we're just like, it blows our mind. And our biggest shows ever were right before the pandemic hit. I mean, we sold out the Stone Pony in New Jersey on our 10th anniversary show. You know, we were playing House of Blues on the Las Vegas Strip, you know, and it's packed. You know, we're just like in the wintertime.
Yeah.
You know, and we're like, what is going on? Like, why can't we stop? Like, they won't let us. Like, it's pretty disturbing, really. But, you know, we also have certain things that we said we would accomplish in this band that we are almost there.
Mm-hmm.
We're just about to do them. Like, hopefully, we were supposed to do them this year, but hopefully next year is what we're going to do.
Anything you can share with us?
Sure. Those three things are, we wanted to go to Europe, which was supposed to happen this year, which like had been in the works for a while and then just kept getting bumped and bumped. But they're saying now that our European tour is going to be in the fall of 2021. So like Germany, Norway, like all the good stuff. So we're going to be over there in October of next year is the word. So we said that. We said we would do an original, and that's definitely going to happen. We're going to write an original song. We've been working on it. And we said we'd make a music video. Those are the
very cool. Those are good goals. Looking forward to that.
So all like 2 out of 3 of those things were slated to happen this year, and then didn't. So, but next year we just have to go all in with it because
all 3 next year. That's all.
Yeah, because you know it's been rough. But I mean, we group chat and we are very in communication with each other, even though we haven't seen each other in a while.
Are you able to write over Zoom or over the phone, or just basically during this time being distance, are you able to write that original music?
I think like we just kind of like members that can write, we're writing stuff on their own and then presenting stuff to see how the band felt about it. And we had started working on it like after shows in like hotel rooms when we're on the road, but like I said, the world stopped and we just kind of like we just stopped. It just happened, and everybody was like got busy with other things and whatever. But I don't know. There was no real time limit on it because with everything with this band, the timing has been very natural. So we didn't force anything. So we're not forcing this either. We figure whatever the song is going to be is going to like, be a testament to our herstory, our legacy. And like, it'll be a good way to leave it if the tide is going out, or if it leads to other things, then cool. It's always just been like, if it's not fun, we're not doing it. So we don't have to answer to anybody. We've always been self-managed. We've always promoted ourselves. We've never had agents and shit like that. We've tried, and then we've fired all of them in a very short amount of time because working with people who didn't necessarily make sense for us or whatever. They just wanted to add us to their roster or some kind of bullshit, but they didn't do the work. It was never as good as the work that we could do ourselves. So we were always just kind of like, piss off. If you're not really in it and understand what we're trying to do, then we didn't care. But we've done well on our own, so it didn't matter.
So at some point in that 10 or 11 or so years, you must have got Judas Priest's attention. I was wondering, when was the first time they noticed you, and what was their reaction to you guys?
Oh man, we met Rob Halford before we even played our first show. So I had just joined as the singer, and that metal show was on VH1 at the time, and they invited us down because Rob was the guest. So we went down that day and we were so excited, and we brand new band. We had just been rehearsing. I mean, we were so new. And when he came out from backstage and walked on, he came right up to us and just like embraced us in a hug. Like they told him where we were sitting and stuff, and he was so excited. And during the commercial breaks, he would talk to us and he'd be like, okay, who's the singer? He wanted to know who's the singer. And I'm like, voila. And he's like, oh, of course it's you. Because he knew me already.
Oh, he did. Oh, that's right. From meeting you so many times.
Yeah. So he was like, wow. He's like, okay. He was excited.
That's awesome.
I just told him, I was like, we're going to make you proud, Daddy. Don't worry about it. And he was just like, okay, send me videos. He'd asked me to send him YouTube videos of us to see like what songs we were working on and, how we were doing and whatnot. So that was cool. KK, his Steel Mill website, did a big feature on us when we first came out, and we were really catching people's attention. And he was so excited, and then was like, hey, why hasn't there been any girls doing this before? So like that was cool. And the other guys have just been like, they know who we are. They've been really cool with us. Even the new cats, like Richie, has been great. He's been very cool with us, and like, we get to hang out with them when they come to town and all that cool shit. So it's been a very cool, relaxed relationship, and it's just been one of just utmost respect. Especially like I respect Halford so much. He's still in a class by himself in 2020, so everything that he's done and stood for, and explained himself and shown himself in his lyrics is just unparalleled. So he doesn't get the credit. Metalheads that know, they know, but in like the grand scheme of music, I feel like it's fucking ridiculous they're not in the Rock Hall yet. They're so instrumental, like they're such the architects of this genre, and it's just like, man, like everything that he stands for as an artist and just the writing style, it's just so fucking cool. Like, to me, that's metal. That is what metal is. It's that swagger, it's the look, it's the energy. Like, they check all the boxes, of like what a metal band, like, that's how you do it. That's what it means to be in a metal band, or to be an artist, a heavy metal artist.
Yeah. See, you truly were meant to be the singer of this group. So.
Well, yeah. No one's crazy to do it this long. I'm sure crazy enough to do it this long. But I just have so much respect for him. And I hope that comes through in my delivery, I try to reinterpret, like, even though it's a tribute band, we're not imitating or trying to look like the band members or doing any kind of that, like, gimmicky horseshit. We were never about that. Like, we were never going to do female versions of the guys' names and shit. Like we're already aware that, like, people think it's like a gimmick. It's not necessarily a gimmick. It's a device that made it easy for people to understand what we were doing, But, I'm still Militia. We always made it very important that people know who we were as players. Like, Hillary Blaze is the drummer, and like, she's not, I don't know what the female version of Scott Travis would be, but like, she's not, Susie Travis or some bullshit. I don't know. It's like, we didn't do that. We were never playing up the joke or making it a joke. We never wanted to be a joke. We wanted to be like, like, we just wanted to have like impeccable attitude and style and just like a real raw power. That's like, nice. Actually, this is funny. You'll appreciate this. When we first started, they wanted us for those freecreditreport.com commercials.
Did they really?
Uh-huh.
That would have been amazing. Did you do it? I never saw it.
Yeah, no. They wanted us for it. We didn't do it. They wanted us to be, because that freecreditreport.com shit was like, that band was like a joke. I don't know what they got paid for doing that, but we just like, we had just started, and we're like, yeah, it would have been funny.
It would have been funny. That's
we didn't want people to think we were funny.
Right.
And we were like, this is probably not a good idea. And we said no. And the company was like, what are you, crazy? Like, we want, we would love to have you girls. And we're like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
And they were like, but it's a national commercial. We're like, yeah, no, we're good. And so we didn't.
I'm not sure if you had done it if you had been asked, like, now. people.
Yeah.
People in
Well,
the
now that
metal
we're, maybe, I mean, now we're established.
right. That's what I'm saying. Is the fans would
Different.
just be like, "Hey, it's it's that band I love." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then everybody else would probably still think it was like
I mean,
but
it's no different than like Rat doing those like commercials for whatever the fuck it is. I don't even
Franco or something like that.
Yeah, it's like they're like, oh, we have a rat problem, and they're in the kitchen playing round and round or whatever. I'm like, that's funny because you know who they are.
Right, right.
You
No,
know,
it's
things are only cute and funny if like the person is
no.
famous, like it or known. You know, it doesn't matter if they're unknown.
I actually saw that commercial like 12 times before I made the connection. I was like, oh, cool, they got Stephen Piercy. Stephen Piercy. And then after a while, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
no problem. Like I just wasn't paying enough attention.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, that's funny, but like now, like all you can do is laugh. But when I guarantee you, if they had had that opportunity when they first came out, they would have said no.
No, probably
Unless
not. I mean, back then in their day, you just didn't. People just didn't do stuff like that. Now everybody does stuff. Everyone's selling bottled water or whatever. But back then we just all would have been turned off by it completely.
It would have ruined their image.
It would have, yeah.
And we decided that this was not a good look for our image.
Yeah. And you said this was at the beginning when you guys first formed?
Yeah. We were already knew we were going to have a shit ton of haters. So like, we didn't want to make it worse.
Yeah.
So we were like, nah, man. Plus we didn't know what Judas Priest would think about that.
Right.
It's like, they might be like, oh, these girls have like stolen our style or our drag and they're doing some weird shit with it. Like we just.
And making money off in a different way that has nothing to do with music.
Right. So like we're kind of like, we're like, well, we're good. Hard pass.
I love that they asked you though. I still think that's really cool.
Yeah, that's funny. We've been asked to do the weirdest shit.
All right. Truly. Well, let's go back to the beginning because you have this really impressive resume. But what was most interesting about you is that you started when you were really young. And in fact, I read somewhere that your career started really when you were about 8 years old when you started playing in that. So I want to know, when was that moment that the music bug bit you for real, where you knew that music was going to be a part of your life? And what were you doing that made that clear to your parents or whoever it was in your world as a child that saw that you had musical ability?
I was an infant.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It was like, my mom was like, had me like in one of those like bouncy like high chairs or whatever the fuck it is, and she said she thinks it was American in Paris was on TV, and she said like I just froze and was just like watching so intensely, and she was like getting nervous because she's like, what is going on with my baby? And she tried to like pull me away, and I would cry and like flip out, and she would put me back in front of the TV, and then it was just like, okay, I'm fine. And she's like, oh shit. And they had to like eat dinner in front of the TV that night because I was throwing a tantrum if I couldn't watch these people singing. And so that was the first straw. The second straw was I hadn't spoken yet. And then like one day I was like, in the car seat, in the back seat. My parents were in the front seat, and Babe by Styx was on. Like my dad used to make these mixtapes, and like, he had his little like, playlist of his favorites, and that was on there. And just like out of nowhere, I sang the last line as if I had been singing like my whole, like forever, for years or something. And I hadn't spoken yet.
Wow. So your first word was
first words were, ooh, babe. And my parents were like, what? They couldn't believe it. Their minds were blown. And I was like, yeah. It's like, bet you didn't know I could do that. And they just were like, oh shit, like we have a singer on our hands. Like we have a musical child, like this musical person. What do we do? I don't know. I think maybe they thought I would grow out of it, but they were hoping I'd grow out of it, but it was just too embedded,
Well, it's not that they were musicians and that they, it was really just came from you naturally and organically.
It came from nowhere. Yeah. It came from the stars. I don't know. It happened. And my parents are not musicians. My parents did not study music. My dad collected records. Mm-hmm. So I heard a lot of different kinds of music growing up always. But I I didn't learn to play from them. It was strictly on my own. So, and I grew up in an area where I didn't know any musicians. Like none of my friends were really playing music or doing anything like that or in bands. Like that all seemed like some far off thing that glamorous people did, and way far away from where I was growing up. It seemed very distant. So like when my dad would be like, okay, this record, this is a band called Traffic, and you're gonna go to your room and you're gonna listen to it. Like that was the most musical interaction like I had with my family. And I would like lay on the floor in my bedroom and I'd be like, how are they making these sounds? And like, how do they know what to say? And how do they know where the music is supposed to go? Like, how do they harness this power? I want this power, you know? So I started playing piano because I wanted to play. I just wanted to figure out how to make music. And I excelled very quickly because I was just so devoted to making music. So like age 8, by the time I got to age 10, I was playing in like malls and stuff like that, you know, like locally around the area where I grew up, and I was competing. Like, I don't know, there's this whole other world, unless you're like a classical musician or pianist, like most people don't know, that is a whole scene unto itself where they compete.
Is it like Dance Moms? Is it like the parents get really involved and
It's
the kids
larger than that.
Really?
Because you can get decorated. Like they can give you awards and stuff like that within their own system. It's called like the guild. Every year I had to do an exam called the guild exam that tested my piano aptitude, which meant I had to memorize X number of pieces. I had to play on a certain scale, like a certain level every year. I had to go higher and higher until like whatever was like, you know, age in my age range. And then I would compete against other people in my group, like age group or age bracket. Like I did county competition, state competition, regional competition, and I was winning awards. I mean, I was getting, it was a weird scene because I was definitely the only Black, not even just female, but I was the only Black person in any of these competitions usually. So it was me and a lot of like Asian kids and occasionally, you know, some white kids, and occasionally there'd be like an Indian kid, you know, but that was it. It was very rigid and you had to play a certain way. You weren't allowed to like put your own style or your own finesse into it. So when I started doing that stuff, like I was being recognized for it or noticed for it, but also kind of like shut down for it, you know? So like, even though like I would play great, because of the way I was sitting on the bench, I would get like deducted for that, you know? Or if I was playing too hard, which is usually the complaint or comment that I got from the judges, was that I played too loudly. You know, it would put me back in the point. So I never got higher than second place in most of the competitions because of stuff like that. Like they were like, oh, we can't really give it to you because you were straddling the piano bench, or because you were sitting too far to the right, or you know, like you were playing too hard, you were banging on the piano, like all these things, like critique. So I started getting critiqued at a really young age, which is, it, you know, it sounds like it sucks, but actually it's pretty great because then you figure out what people like, what people expect, and then what you want to do when you're offering music to people. So it was really good training for even what I'm doing now, you know, as far as like just being the vessel for the music, but also like elements of surprise and bringing in things that are exciting, you know, to performances. All of that was instrumental to like, you know, what I'm doing now.
So it sounds like you got into it enough that you enjoyed it and you wanted to keep doing it, even though you were getting this feedback that was like very almost controlling. It sounds like you have to sit this way and play this way. So at what point or if this happened at all, did you ever have a point where you're like, screw this, I know how to play. I know exactly how I want to sit, how I want to Yeah, I want to do everything. When was that moment for you?
College.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You got all the way to college before you, okay.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, I was having my best years ever in high school, piano-wise. I remember I had done a concert without my shoes on. I was barefoot. And the only reason why I was barefoot was because I couldn't find shoes to match my dress. And they took it as like, oh, she's so crazy. You know, it's like, it's so funny. Like, it was actually literally, I couldn't find shoes to match this dress. But I was getting kind of a reputation for being kind of weird and bombastic musically in Baltimore, where I was going to high school. And then one of my music teachers was like, oh, you should go to college for music. And I was like, what? They have those? I had no idea. I was like, yeah, I want to go to college for music. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And so I went through that whole process of trying to find a school that could like scratch all the itches that I had, because I had to find a place that did piano, a place where I could sing, a place where I could do acting, a place where I could learn to write songs. Like, it didn't exist. You know, so it was like, okay, so I kind of have to find the school where I can at least check some of those boxes. It was tough. So, you know, I got into all the typical places, you know, NYU, Juilliard, you know, all this kind of shit. But the programs were so segregated. Like, you couldn't take piano and sing, which is weird. Yeah. So I went to Boston Conservatory because I could still play piano, learn to sing, do theater, do dance, which I didn't really care about at the time, and they didn't really have anything for like songwriting or whatever. But we were right next to Berkeley, so
right. And they were still separate at the time, right? They were still
separate at the time, yeah. Which now I look at their program and I'm like, man, I would have killed for that back then.
Yeah, because now you probably could get almost everything.
Oh yeah, you can get everything.
Was maybe the only thing missing, or
you can get everything.
Yeah.
But when I got to conservatory, the piano teachers wouldn't touch me. They were like, you've tested out. Like, we have nothing left to teach you. And I was like, cool. Okay. So that was it.
Do you just say, okay, I'll focus on singing now, or?
Yeah, I did, but I was like, I still was playing for me. And I was using it. I didn't realize it, but I was using it to write music in my head at the time. And I remember I had officially written my first full song, like when I was choosing which college to go to. Like, I was in the shower, like, and I just gotten acceptance letters, and I like could hear this song, like, in my head, where it was Close to Life, which I released with Swear in Your Life, but it was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like, I'm meant to get out of fucking Maryland and go to a city and make some music. Like, I just knew it, you know. It just felt like, you know, I was on the path, you know. But I was still kind of like timid about writing songs yet, because I didn't know anyone who did it, and I just wasn't sure if I knew what to say, or how to communicate with people in that way. So when I met people at Berkeley that were doing it, I was like, shit, I didn't even know Berkeley existed. You know, the internet was like, you know, chat rooms and you know, Friendster at the time. So it was like, it wasn't used as like the access to all the information on the planet yet. It was still very like compartmentalized. So I would hang out with the Berkeley kids a lot because I just got along with them better, I guess, you know. And I was kind of like I was too hard to ignore talent-wise. Here's that overperforming thing again. I was too hard to ignore talent-wise at my school, but they didn't know what to do with me. You know, when I would perform or give work or whatever, it was just kind of like, what are we dealing with right now? And plus I just kind of was doing so much more than the other people in my department, you know. And then by my sophomore year, I joined my first band, and like, it was my boyfriend at the time. He was starting an industrial band with some friends, and he was like, oh, do you want to be in this band? And I was like, what? It blew my mind. Like, I was like, you want me to be in your band? They were like, well, you can sing. And I'm like, yeah, but it's more than singing. Like, being in a band is more than singing. You know, I'm like, well, what do I do on stage? Like, what do I do? I'm not standing in front of an instrument. What do I do? Like, and they were like, you'll know what to do when you do it. And I was like, okay. So like, we would start writing these songs, and actually they were really, I didn't give too much input at the time. It just crescendoed over time. Like, I started off very small, but in the band it was called Disciples of Astaroth. It was me and another singer, and guitar, bass, and keys. We didn't have a drummer. We played to a drum machine. And actually, an interesting little cross section. I don't know if you're familiar with the Murder Dolls. Do you remember them from like the 90s? It was Joey Jordison from Slipknot had started this like other band, and Wednesday 13 was the singer. Eric Griffin, who's now in the Jenna Torturers, who was a good friend of ours, is in that band. AC Slade, who's playing with like the Misfits and Joan Jett and all this kind of stuff now, and then Ben Graves, who was playing like Pretty Boy Floyd and like, you know, a couple other bands and stuff like that. He was going to be our drummer at the time, but then he lived far away, so like we were like, fuck this, we'll just play with the drum machine. That was like going to happen, and Ben unfortunately passed away like recently, and it was really painful because he was the first out of our circle that died, you know. So like, it was so traumatic, but it was a really exciting time because we were like, you know, it was like the late 90s, and like my generation is powerful. We gave the world grunge and industrial. It was pretty badass. And this was what we were doing. We kind of wanted our sound to be like, we wanted to be like the satanic My Life with the Thrill Kill cult. Like, we wanted to be like, but we wanted to be like dancey. Like, it was fun also. Like, the other singer in the band was also doing drag at night. So like, and he was the outsider in the drag circle because he was doing creepy goth before Sharon Needles. Like, he was going by Britt the Unholy in the Boston scene, and like the drag queens were like, what do we do with this like satanic drag queen? It was so funny. It was so random, but being in it, it all made perfect sense because we were all like, you know, club kids and who loved heavy music. So we ended up picking up a lot of steam in Boston, but we were the only industrial band in the area. Everybody else was doing these like cute like pop punk bands, or they were doing like, you know, wannabe grunge or whatever. And here we come with our like latex and, you know, like we were just like, we looked so weird. It was awesome. We just looked like freaks next to everybody else, but it was really hard to play with other bands because everyone's just like, they're good and they can fill the room, but what are they doing?
Yeah, you probably didn't pair.
We didn't pair with anyone, so we
like,
ended up just having drag queens open for us.
Yeah,
like we'd have like drag queens like come out to like and do like deicide songs and just like scare everybody. Like, that was the whole tactic. But like, our crowd was like club kids and ravers and drag queens and college kids and like, you know, nerds, jocks, the works. It was like everybody, and everybody be like dancing furiously. It was so much fun. There's videos of it floating around the internet here and there, but we ended up getting a brief little offering from Cleopatra Records. So like, the one commercial thing we did is on Cleopatra Records.
Nice.
And then like, the band disbanded. We all moved to like other opposite ends of the country.
So it sounded like Boston treated you pretty well for the time that you were. And I'm actually a Boston girl too. So
are you? Oh, that's cool.
It may have been in grad school when you were in college. I'm not sure, but I suspect that we've overlapped a little bit in the city.
Yeah, Boston was awesome until my senior year. I actually got kicked out of college for insubordination. It's a long story that I won't bore you with the details, but like, one of my, not professors, but like one of the chairmen at the theater department at my school, he had kind of targeted me for being like an inflammatory presence in the college. I had directed like a very racially charged piece as part of my directing major. It was a Amiri Baraka piece called The Dutchman. And I remember they pulled me out of class one day to be like, why did you bring this element into our school? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they're like, this race play that you brought into our school. Like, why couldn't you just direct like a nice dinner table comedy? And I'm like, I just thought I didn't understand what they were asking me. Right. I was like, I'm directing the piece that I care about.
Right.
It's not, it has nothing to do with you or the school.
Right.
And from that moment on, I was just like, I had a big red X over my face, you know, and anything that I did, they just tried to cock block it. And it was just like, I was getting, you know, the doors shut at that point. Plus they were hated on me because I was in a band outside of school. Like no one was in a band outside of school. It was like, that meant you weren't a serious actor if you were in a band outside of school. So like, I was like on all the shit lists at that point. And then I was directing my senior directing piece and they just like did a coup. They sabotaged me and they're like, yeah, like you're out of here. Like you're disobeying us, you're disrespecting us, you're disobeying orders, and you're out. And I'm like, I took them to court, like all the things, and did not win. The judge was like,
sorry, it would be a very different conversation if they tried to start a coup against you now.
Wouldn't it? It would be.
Sure all your classmates would have had your back at the very least.
Oh, they did. Like there was petitions for me to stay, and like.
Okay. Oh, that's good at least.
All this shit was going on, and they were like, well, you can come back next year if you really want to finish. And I was like, man, I'm not giving you guys another dime. I mean, I was on scholarship, but I was like still paying like a good amount, you know. I was like, why would I come back when I have 2 weeks left? I was like, fuck you all. You know, it was a big sabotage. Like that guy had told some of my professors not to grade my finals, and like, I mean, it was just like, it was so. I could go on, but I won't bore you with the details. But the good news is, thanks to the pandemic, if you can even give thanks to a pandemic, like I had taken I was just like feeling my brain rotting out of my skull during this whole pandemic. And I was like, I need to feed my head. And I took some music nerd classes over at Berkeley and at Harvard. So I got Berkeley and Harvard certified this year. Nice. And they were like, hey, Harvard material, you want to put some skin in that game? And I was like, okay, what would that mean? They're like, yeah, we just need you to send your transcripts in. And I was like, oh, yeah, about that. That's probably not a good idea. And I don't know what those transcripts look like right now.
Maybe if you wanted to give me the degree that I earned short of 2 weeks from however many years ago.
Right. So I was like, you know what? I'm sure whoever was there when I was there is probably gone. Let me just see who's left. And sure enough, most of the people are gone. The person that was like, you know, my antichrist is gone. You know, my arch nemesis is gone. And I just reached out to them on a whim and I was like, hey, looking at maybe continuing my education. I didn't finish, but can we chalk this up to time served? Like in prison speak. Time served. Here's all the shit I've done since I've left your doors, you know. Like and they were just kind of like, whoa, okay. And they called me and they were like, let's talk about what happened. And I just told them what happened. And she's like, I'll get back to you. Had some meetings. And then they were like, yeah, that wasn't fair what happened to you. And we're going to fix that.
That's awesome.
And so I'm graduating from college in January.
That is amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks. It's so fucked up.
It's crazy. It shouldn't have been that way, but you know what? Yeah. They gave you what you earned, so
yeah. There. So like it was so funny. Like now, if my life didn't confuse other people enough, now I'm gonna be class of 2021.
There you go.
It just all makes sense in the grand scheme of my weird life.
People who know you well, it probably does make sense.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry you had that experience with Boston towards the end before you left.
But literally just with a person.
With a person, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear.
He was the wrench. It's like, whatever. He's got to live with himself.
It's almost a shame that that person wasn't still there, because I feel like if you had still called them and said, by the way, we need to talk, I still think it would have gone in your favor if you had that conversation now. I really do.
So
I don't know. I mean, who wants?
I also I'm not completely like innocent here.
Huh?
Over the years, I did send him like evil voicemails.
You left that part out. You left that part out of the conversation. But
like I said, it's a long story. I have like a penchant for prank calls.
Okay.
I do. I'm not, I'm a troublemaker. I'm the first to admit. Right. I am the consummate shit starter. If there is shit to be started, I'm probably the one that pressed the red button.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's good to know about you also. All right. Well, you've done amazing stuff. And after you left Boston, I believe your next stop was New York City. And there, you've done a lot of cool stuff. I just kind of want to rattle through some of it.
Sure.
I know that you have worked with Cyndi Lauper and Taylor Dayne, which I know they're not metal, but I think they're both amazing musicians. What did you do with them? And like, was this right when you got to New York, or was this more recent?
Well, I always knew I'd live in New York, and I wanted to go to NYU, but my parents were like not ready for that. And they didn't think I was ready for it either. And in hindsight, I definitely wasn't ready for it. But when I got to New York, it was such a relief, because it was just such a mecca of unique people and personalities. And, this was a time, it was like it was the early 2000s, and like, clubbing was king, like nightlife was king in New York, so I went to Limelight and all that kind of shit, and that was the scene, CBGBs, rock clubs, all kinds of stuff. And I really was thirsty to establish myself as a New York, music fixture in New York. And I had then got a tour. I got cast in Jesus Christ Superstar European tour really quickly. So like I was gone for like a year. And then finally I was like, I am not going to stay out in Europe and play, Soul Girl #2 or whatever. I was like, it's Leeds or nothing is what I told myself. It's like, I even though it was fun, I was frustrated because I felt like I was being like pigeonholed into this like very stereotypical role. And I was like, that's frustrating when I can do a lot more, like when I have a lot more to offer. And so that was the show that made me decide, like, all right, if I want to do theater, it's going to be on my terms, and I have to be a lead. Like, I'm not going to be in the ensemble, And when I got back, a friend of mine from the tour was selling merch for Sandra Bernhard. That's how it started. And then I met her, and she liked me because I was Black and Jewish. So she was like,
a nice one that comes to your advantage.
I guess. I mean, like, it hadn't come to my advantage my whole life until that point. So, like, we hit it off in a way, and like, I was like, by the way, I sing. And then I became her backup singer. And Sandra has a very large celebrity following. Everyone comes to see her shows. The audience is like, who's who? Every night it was like, oh, who's in the audience tonight? Oh, Liza Minnelli. Oh, who's in the audience tonight? Dustin Hoffman. Oh, who's in the audience tonight? Ed Norton. It was just like, it was that constantly, And so oftentimes those gigs was because I got poached from the Sandra show. So I get up and do my thing with Sandra, and then it's like, a week later, I get a phone call, and it's Taylor Dayne, and she's like, hey, are you exclusive with Sandra? You want to come sing with me? Nice. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is Taylor Dayne? How did you get this number? So like, I ended up getting passed around, because like, once your name is in the backup singer hat, I call it the black up singer hat. Once you're in the backup singer hat, it's like, oh, okay, then that means that you're able to accomplish this thing.
Right.
So you're able to look good on stage, but know your place.
Right.
Right. And that means you're able to hold an audience, but not steal focus if we don't want you to. Came up a lot for me.
This seems to be a reoccurring theme since we're like little of like, we want you to do this thing this way. We want your talent, but we don't want you to use it fully.
Yeah. Only so much of you know? And so because there's not a lot of people who want or choose to do that or are willing to do that, because it's very suppressive in a way, performance-wise, at least for me. There's some people, they shine doing it and they're very happy being limited in that way. But I always kind of was like disgusted at the formula. I don't necessarily, I mean, with Sandra, I was the only other singer, so that was cool. But like, you know, when I started getting like other gigs from it and kind of passed around, it was usually me and like some other girl, you know, and then we're like told to like move together and sync and like, you know, do these like awkward robotic gestures together. And I'm like, why does this feel like captivity? Like, it just felt like I'm like, I don't want to move in time with some other girl. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be a package deal. I'm not, you know, I'm not a twin.
Well, speaking of package deals, do they try to like put you with another girl? Like they're like, oh, these two work, Militia works really well with this other girl, and try to put you together all the time? Or is it really just every time they hire 2, 3, 4 people and then you just have to figure it out?
It can be both.
Okay.
You know? So yeah, so I got poached for Cyndi Lauper. It was actually a thing where it was like her and Sandra were doing a show together, and she didn't have any backup singers at the time, and they're like, oh, well, if you're gonna use, like, she was using like some people from Sandra's band, and then it was like, oh, well, do you want this singer too? Like, I was just thrown in like as part of the arrangement, like, look, you can get a singer, and like, you know, it's all part of the package. And she was like, yeah, why not? And this was pretty crazy because Cyndi Lauper was my idol when I was a kid.
Yeah. So
I had to play it off like, you know, like she was just a regular person. So it was, she still doesn't know. I mean, like, I was not going to share that with her. Yeah. You know, I didn't want her.
Not even after the fact? See, I would have just.
No way. Be different. You know, so I was just like really, really thrilled to be in her circle finally. Because I never imagined I'd sing with her. I mean, she was one of those people on TV that I was looking at as a kid going, how the fuck do I get in there? You know, she was friends with Prince. She's friends with, you know, she does all this shit. And it was like, she was doing what I wanted to do and didn't really admit it to myself yet, I guess, at that point. So when I finally worked with her, it was exciting, but it was thoroughly disappointing. We didn't get along.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
It was like kind of devastating, actually.
Was it another one of those like don't sit on the bench sideways type of things, or was it just bad chemistry?
Both.
Did you prank call her, Militia?
No, I never told her because we didn't get the chance to speak about it. But you know, so we did the gig, and I don't know, we just didn't get along. I just, anyway, it was dueling personalities, I guess. And then at times we would get along. I don't know. It's difficult. I would have to tell you that story over a whiskey.
Okay, maybe. I'll do it that way.
But I was pretty like aggravated because I wanted it to work out. You know, I wanted to be down with her in some way, but it just didn't work out. So that was also, I was poached for Nancy Sinatra through the Sandra gig. I was poached for, and from that I was poached for, I had a bunch of things that started coming where they were like, oh yeah, you know, you do that thing, you do blacking vocals, hey, do it for this person. And I was like, no. And all the while I was keeping it hidden from most people. I was hiding it because I wanted to be taken seriously as like a rock and metal singer. So I wasn't advertising that I was singing backup for these people, like celebrities. I was not advertising at all. Because at the same time, I was VJing at Fuse.
Right.
And I was trying to, like, you know, establish myself as a fixture in the metal community. And I just didn't think people would understand, like, how do you call yourself metal and then you go sing Tell It to My Heart, you know, like,
Yeah.
it just wasn't, I didn't want to cross the lines at that point because I knew people wouldn't get it, especially the metal community.
I think the metal community is funny because I think there are a lot of people who draw that very hard line in the sand. It's not even a fine line. It's like a don't cross it. But I do find, and maybe this is just me, my fantasy, but I do find that female metalheads, and most of the metalheads I knew and hung out with were female, we kind of just like what we like. And even though we're metalheads and that's our favorite, like, we don't care. Like, if we want to listen to Cyndi Lauper, we're going to listen to Cyndi Lauper. Yeah. And I think there's a little bit of a difference between your average female metal head and your average male one.
Yeah. And that's true. But there's like the metal purists. Oh my god, my friend said the funniest term the other day. I forget what he called them, but he was calling them like sludge lords or, you know, like doom lords or metal lords for people that are like, there is metal and that is it, you know, like those guys. I was worried about those guys. Like, I knew they were already going to criticize me for being black and being into metal, and I didn't want it to come at me from another side where they were judging me and not taking me seriously as a metalhead because I was black up singing for these people.
Right, because they have proof now because you sang for
they're like, see, you're not real, you're not authentic. You know, back in the day, authenticity was everything. And it seems like over the last decade, it seems like authenticity got real fuzzy for a while. And then now I feel like it's back, you know? So, but at the time, yeah, it was like, I finally just had to be like, all right, I'm going to shed this skin because it's easy to get stuck in those circles. You could go on. I have friends that still do it. They've been doing it for years and they're just going to keep doing it, and it's work, and I get it.
Yeah.
But man, I remember one night, like on New Year's Eve, it was after a gig where I was black up singing, and like the gig didn't go well for the whole band, and the audience was yelling at us, and it was fucking awful. And I remember I just trashed the dressing room, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. This isn't who I am anymore. It was fun. There were a lot of perks, but it was like, I gotta grow, man. Like, I'm feeling stifled. And I just, like, anytime those gigs would come in and they pull my name out of the hat, it was like, yeah, I'm not doing that anymore, but thank you. Or like, oh, I'm doing something different, but thank you. Or I'm not available, so thank you. You know, and they were big gigs I was turning down. Major artists. And I was just like, I can't do it. I just knew I couldn't. It reminds me of, like, I remember Dave Grohl told a story once about how, like, Tom Petty called him to be his drummer. And he said that he had to say no. And then, because he was working on and was focused on the Foo Fighters. Like, I get it. You know, when you can write and you have so much to say, it's really hard to be locked into someone else's vision and world, you know. That means you have a limit on how much you can express yourself. And it was upsetting constantly. Like, every show I'd just be like so disappointed that I wasn't showing the best of myself because I had to fit into this celebrity's shadow. You know, it fucking sucked in a way. As an artist, it was awful, you know, but as a growing experience, it was amazing.
Do you view that bad night that you had as sort of a gift of, okay, here's my moment, because now I've known this all along, but now, you know, I kind of have an easy out? Or do you feel like if you hadn't had that night, you were still really close to just saying done with the backup singing?
I would have figured it out. I was close to saying I was done, but that just, like, solidified it.
Oh.
Yeah, it just pushed it over the edge because, you know, like, the money was good or okay, but it's the lifestyle that's, like, fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're like with someone who's, like, hugely famous, and then you're getting to travel with them and, like, you know, stay in 5-star hotels with them, and you know, limos and parties and like, you know, it's fun. But like, I just was sick not accomplishing what I needed to accomplish. Or I was getting seen as this one narrow vision. Like it just was putting out a very narrow, limited vision. I remember like being in Toronto. We played like Niagara Falls one night. I forget who I was with. I think it was with Taylor. And we were all, the whole band, we were all sitting at the table after the gig, getting a meal. And the waitress was like, "Oh, the whole band's here." And she was like, "What do you play?" You know, going around to like everyone asked, "What do you play?" And then she asked me, she goes, "What do you play?" And I said, "Oh, I'm the backup singer." She goes, "Oh, I could have figured that out." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, because you have backup singer hair."
Oh no, that's like the last
like,
you ever need to hear in your
right.
life.
And, you know, that whole idea sends me on some other spiral because I was like, why is it that these roles are set up this way or people are comfortable with these roles? Like, yeah, people are used to like the white blonde diva in the front, and then the black rhythm section or like whatever, and then the backup singer is usually a black female with an afro or something like that that makes them, the person in the front, look really cool. Like they're her friends, you know, like it's like that kind of thing. And then usually there's like a white guy on guitar. Like it's like that's the traditional setup of most pop bands, right? And I always was just like, man, I am so sick of that. Like when I see that like Rolling Stones setup, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like, it makes me ill. And I'd seen a couple bands that I really respected doing that thing, and I've been like, oh god, like I'm so tired of that visual, you know? And so I always wanted to make it something different. So I'm always very aware of that when I play or put bands together, that those roles were never like enforced. I never wanted to like put out that image of that typical structure. And anytime I see a band, especially now in 2020, anytime I see a band who does that setup, I'm just like, man, like still hanging on to that look, and it's so tired. You know, that's why I have so much respect for people that actually notice that and make the change. You know, like some really big celebrities follow that model, you know, and it works for them, or it's expected. Those are the roles that you play on stage. And I just was like, it was honestly really frustrating and would make me super angsty and aggressive over the years, where I'm like, I don't want to fulfill the roles that you expect of me. I don't. I'm a lead singer. I'm a lead bitch. I'm the lead songwriter. And so, but there were no models of that, you know, that looked like my type. Like the closest thing to it would be like Tina Turner. And Tina Turner isn't as heavy as I am. And Tina Turner isn't as aggressive as I am as a front person. And, you know, Tina Turner wears wigs. She covers her hair. And Tina Turner sells a very sexual, like skin, you know, short skirts type version with high heels, you know, a very, it's just a different kind of drag than what I do.
Yeah.
You know? So most of the people that I wanted to be like were men, because there were no female artists that were doing that. And like I used to like get really bogged down and be like, why can't just like what I am be accepted as like the vision of a front person, you know? So I was just like, all right, well, fuck it. Then I'm just going to be that front person on my own terms. And I'm not going to wear the high heels in that way. And I'm not going to, you know, wear a short skirt. And I'm not going to, you know, wear a huge wig. And I'm not going to, unless I want to,
right.
You know, I just wanted to change all that. And like finally now in 2020, I see those typical roles being like kind of eradicated. Not even eradicated, it's just going extinct. And I'm glad it's going extinct because I'm so sick of it, you know? I'd rather see something different where it's like oh, this person got the gig because they're really great,
Right.
not because they've fulfilled that stereotype, you know. So people are getting the message now, but it's taken a long time for people to catch up to this.
Well, I think the people who are in charge of making those decisions, I think half of them are doing it intentionally because they decided that this is safe, this is acceptable to the audience that isn't particularly open-minded or thoughtful. But I think sadly, and I think this is almost more disturbing, is the other half just kind of go along and they don't even realize it because they don't see it. You know what I mean? It's like, just open your eyes, pay attention, and really just hire the best person for the job and don't worry about what people look like, you know, in that sense of, you know, you have to have this person that looks this way and you have to have the, I mean, that's ridiculous. You're making music, you know, having stage clothes and hair, and that's all fine and good, but
marketing is
a very different thing.
Yeah, well, the you know, gatekeepers had put marketing in front of everything. I honestly like we think about what's been acceptable mainstream music, like the 90s, like grunge was impossible to ignore because it was that good. But there was a blueprint that ended up being the, you know, there was the model, and then the blueprint was used and copied, and then it became like an assembly line of grunge bands, right? So like any band that was coming out after Pearl Jam had decided they need, you know, their singer with long hair and a plaid flannel shirt and like, you know, work boots and whatever. And that became like the template. And a lot of like not great bands got through because they followed the template. So I get it. You know, the industry was just trying to milk this model, you know, and make money off of it. I mean, it happens to every single genre. The genre starts in the underground and then it blows up and then it gets imitated, you know. So there's that. But I find that now what is starting to blow up, because the industry is in a shambles, the gatekeepers don't really have that much control, is like, you know, I think alternative music has taken a very unique turn, whether it's black alternative or what would you call it, like trap soul or any of this kind of like genre blending type things, Afrofuturism or futurism, whatever, avant-garde music. It's been like genre bending is the norm now because they can't suppress it, because now the artist is the gatekeeper, you know. So, and then there was that awkward time between grunge here and now, and then in between then where all the pop princesses were getting signed.
Yeah,
but that was a direct reaction to all the grunge gods dying. So like once the grunge people were dying from like drugs or suicides, the labels were like, fuck this, my show pony, you know, my cash cow just killed themselves, so I'm going to invest in some 14-year-old girl that's a former Mickey Mouse clubber, because then I get a longevity thing going, like a life, you know, I get the span of her life to make money off of her, you know. So then you have like the Britneys and the you know, I think the princesses continued all the way up to Ariana Grande. I think she's the last of the pop princesses, but that was the model because they were sick of their artists dying, and they just decided, we're going to invest in these kids.
That was always surprising to me, because not surprising, but it always felt very apparent to me that they had just decided that these people were the biggest before they had even done anything. Because I remember, now granted, this is not my generation of music. I came up on like glam metal and actually listened to a lot of old people music before that. But when Britney and all of them came up, I just remember not knowing who she was and then seeing her on the cover of Rolling Stone. And I was like, that's funny, because there's a lot of bands that I listened to that should have been on the cover of Rolling Stone that never got the chance. And here's this girl I've never even heard of. And even if everybody else has heard of her, she hasn't been out very long. So how does she end up on a cover, you know?
Right. They put all these newbies and just blew them up. They built these newbies and just blew them up. They're like, this is what you're going to like, people. You know, like that was it. We were just force fed these girls, you know. And some guys too.
Boys. There were some, I think the NSYNCs and the Backstreet Boys came out at the same time. Yeah. I have one other project I want to ask you about, and I'm curious as to whether this felt like another backup singing gig, or you felt like you could really shine in this one because it was closer to the kind of music that you play a lot of different music, but I know you as a metal girl, is the Van Helsing's Curse that you did with Dee Snider and Joe Franco and a bunch of other really amazing musicians. When did that come along for you, and what did that feel like to be a part of it? And actually, if you could just explain a little bit about what that is for anybody who isn't lucky enough to know.
Sure. Van Helsing's Curse was the brainchild of Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. He saw TSO, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and was like, oh, that's really cool. We saw like their Christmas concert. So it's like basically heavy metal Christmas carols. And he was like, well, what if we do this kind of thing, but for Halloween, which I like better? And he and Joe Franco put together this like crazy fucking heavy metal horror orchestra for Halloween that played all these horror themes. And we would just take over the month of October and tour. It was fucking amazing. It was like a cast of like 30 plus people. Orchestra, Gregorian chant choir, heavy metal band. And then Dee was the narrator and I was the lead vocalist. And all the music was in Latin. It was just like, I don't know why they made that decision because they didn't have to pay for the rights to the lyrics or something like that. But yeah, so we sang like, arrangements of really, really cool arrangements of horror scores, like the theme from like Ave Satani from The Omen, or the Monsters theme or whatever. It was like all this fun shit, but it was like really fucking awesome heavy metal arrangements of these songs. And over time, Dee and I ended up doing a duet from that of Cry Little Sister from the Lost Boys, which is actually, it's on recording, you can find it. And we toured it for a number of years, and we actually had a residency at the Joint in Las Vegas, which was like, it was fucking awesome. That was the first time I had been part of a show and we were on like a billboard, and I was like, that was so exciting seeing the billboard for the first time. And we were at the Hard Rock Casino, and like we got there, and like our pictures and everything were like on craps tables and slot machines and all kinds of fun stuff. It was really, really cool. So that was the first time I had worked with Dee, and I remember like Dee's manager called me and was like, they had heard about me through the grapevine. They saw me sing. They saw one of their people saw me sing at a Queen tribute concert at BB King's in Times Square, and I sang The Show Must Go On. And they said that they were looking for a female singer, ideally or preferably a woman of color, which was like amazing, and who's like a metalhead. And they were like, yeah, you're the only one we're seeing for this. So we really hope you get it, do a good job, because, we're not seeing anyone else for this. And I was like, ooh, no pressure. So I came in, I sang for Joe, and he was like, that's it, like, it's you. And I did the tours, I did the soundtracks, and like, it was awesome because Dee was also one of my idols from when I was a kid. I grew up watching Dee on MTV and watching Twisted Sister on MTV. Never imagined that I would get the chance to work with him. But it was funny because when they brought me in for it and we had been touring, I had to like, again, suppress my like childhood excitement, like of working with someone who I was so amazed by. And I never told him that. Just putting it all out there now. I never told him that, but I had been going to Twisted Sister shows like by myself. And I said to him one time in the dressing room, I just couldn't resist. I was like, hey Dee, you remember that Twisted Sister, I think it was a Dee Snider SMF concert or something like that. It was like one of these like solo shows that he did, a reunion show or something like that he did at Don Hills. I said, do you remember it all? Like there was a girl who kept jumping onto the stage and sharing the mic with you. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, that was me. Remember that shit starting thing I was telling you about? Like,
another reoccurring theme.
yeah, it's a recurring thing. And like, I didn't know him, but like when he played, I was just like so into it. And there was like no girls in the audience, like whatsoever. Definitely not in the front. And I just kept jumping up onto the stage and like singing with him because I knew all the songs. And it didn't come. I didn't let him know that until way later because I didn't want him to realize how big of a fan I was before taking the gig because I wanted to be respected, you know.
Funny.
So that was that was something. But I love Dee so much. Like he's just so cool. And you know, my original bands, Priestess, we've all opened for Twisted at some point or another. You know, over the years, we opened for Twisted Sister and Bent Brother. You know, the that's Twisted Sister without makeup. And I love his kids. I love his wife. I mean, you know, like they're awesome people. Great rock and roll hearts.
Yay. Yeah. That's great. So what are you working on now? I mean, I know everyone's kind of home and staying safe, but what do we have to look forward to aside from your 3 goals for Judas Priestess? Is there anything else like solo material or gigs and stuff like that coming up?
Sure. So another thing that quarantine has been good for is that I was able to write more songs than ever before. So that was nice. And I've taken to scoring. So I'm actually in the Society of Composers and Lyricists, and I'm one of the new like up and coming composers that they're paying a little extra attention to because I'm part of the mentor program. And so I've been scoring a lot lately, which has been really exciting. And I've done some licensing for like TV and film and movies, and like it's the goal to score a film. So I'm definitely on track to do that, which is really exciting. And I released some of my scoring catalog. You can listen to it on like SoundCloud. I haven't posted anywhere else. It's just on SoundCloud. So people can check that out if they want. And I'm working on a new metal band, an original metal band with friends of mine that I met at Berkeley. We were all in college at the same time. They had a metal band called Kevorkian that I just fucking loved and respected so much. I mean, they were really the first guys that I met that were making metal in my circle, and it was like, wow, this shit is like, and it was like smart metal. It was very much like progressive, like in the vein of like kind of like a Dream Theater meets like the kind of like the riffs have a lot of swagger, like Pantera type thing. And the guitarist is mixed, so like it was like, wait, you're mixed and you're doing metal. It was like, like I felt so lucky to find him, you know. So yeah, these guys, Brad Kensinger and Neil Davis, like we go way back, and we performed together before, like just doing like I would do like some Pantera Machine Head covers with them, like just at New York City clubs and stuff like that. But to me, they were always like, oh, these guys are fucking like, they're such great players, you know. So I always just like, anytime we're writing together and making stuff, I'm just like, I want to give them everything I got because musically they're just so awesome. And this has been the first time I've been in an original project where I didn't have to do all the roles or have such a heavy hand and influence of writing music parts or whatever. Like they can write parts. It's like, wow, like that's really cool, and intricate parts, you know, and really make cool musical statements and stuff. Very like, it sounds like melodic Meshuggah, if you could believe that.
Well, we'll get to hear it.
Yeah, we've already finished like 5 songs, and it's some of the most unique stuff I've written in my life, for sure. I just like gave myself permission to just like be as experimental but catchy as possible.
Mhm.
Like, because I want it to be something that like people can shout, but people can sing too. So like it has all of those elements, and I can't wait for you to hear it.
That's awesome. Well, you'll have to come back and talk to us about it when it's ready.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, I can't wait to share that with you. I'm also working on solo Militia Vox material always. I have a remix album that's coming out. That's a remix of The Villainess, and it's got like I did some of my own remixes, and then like I had friends of mine doing remixes too. So like there's remixes from CX Kidtronic, who is Saul Williams guy, and he's worked with like Trent Reznor, and he was in Atari Teenage Riot. He did a remix for me. My buddy Shane Boulos, who was in Swear in Your Life with me, who's in the metal band Toxic, he did a remix. Stacey Hale from Detroit, who was like the godmother of techno in Detroit, like she's doing a remix for me. Yeah, there's just like it's just gonna be this like crazy assault of sounds. It's really cool. So I'm excited for that. And then the solo Militia original album that's already in the can is called Hiss, and it's a very like ode to lo-fi sounding avant-dark music. So it's very heavy, but it's very experimental. But like the Villainous album was so expensive to make. I can't even tell you how much it cost. It was like each track was ringing in like around like $4 to $5 grand, you know, and it's like a full-length album, so that I paid for out of pocket. You know, I'm not signed or anything like that. So, and I'm like too proud to do crowdfunding. So I was like, yeah, I think I'm good with like releasing expensive albums. Like, I would love to do a lo-fi album and just have it be very gritty and sound like some like discovered basement tapes or something like that. You know, real noisy. You know, just like a. I sampled like I've gotten so that it sounds ridiculous, but I've gotten so I record sounds in real life, like on my phone. Like if I hear like a weird staticky sound, I'll record it and then pitch shift it and layer it and things like that. It's really nerdy, but it's like a game. So I just try to capture like whatever I think is like an unusual sound or something that sounds like very immense or whatever, and just try to layer it and make it sound like this other soundscape. So when you do that, you're creating sounds that, you know, aren't samples, first of all, but I get to create things that are like a digital collage, you know, like a sonic collage of just my surroundings and things like that. And as you know, in New York, there's all kinds of sounds to sample. But
is the lo-fi album going to be still full length? Like, is the idea to be able to make as many songs as you want, but the vibe is going to be a little bit different so that you can afford it?
Yeah, basically. It's like, well, it wasn't even just like a question of like affording. It was just like, because of the model of music, the way that exists in present day, you don't get the return off the investment. So it has to be cost effective, unless you're licensing your music, which I have licensed my music. The expensive songs have started to be finished paying for themselves. Vow in particular has paid for itself because of licensing. But because people are putting out so much music so much faster, and it's not a quality game anymore. It's all about the messages that you're saying. It's not necessarily about the polish on it. Which I'm fine with, because some of my favorite recordings are like, you know, old cassette tapes I had from back in the day that sound is starting to warp, you know, so like I sample that. I have a copy of The Cure's Disintegration that was so worn out that you can hear the music in reverse from the opposite side. Like I sample things like that, because those sounds don't exist anywhere else in the world. So like, yeah, I feel like I've made like whatever is going to be the equivalent of my pop record, you know? And like now because I don't have to answer to anyone, I can just make stuff that I think is interesting and fun. I mean, I always have, but it was never contingent on like, oh, I'm doing this so this could potentially be played on commercial rock radio, you know, which I think like I kind of had that in the back of my mind when I wrote Vow. I was like, okay, I'm going to write something commercial now because I want to just see if I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so there's that. And then I also guest sang with a band called the Vaticans out of LA. And they're like a hard rock / metal orchestral experience.
Mm-hmm.
So there's strings in it. And during the pandemic, I went out to LA and we recorded the song and shot the video in like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And that'll be coming out in the beginning of next year, spring of next year. And it's definitely the most commercial thing I've ever done. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to show people that, you know, that like all the sides of my Rubik's Cube, like there's a lot of colors going on. So, and I feel like that's kind of the wave of the future because most people want their artists to just do this one thing mm-hmm. and just be good at this one thing and you stay in your lane. Like when I was first starting out, someone actually told me that as a bit of advice, like find the one thing you're good at and just stay in your lane. Just do that one thing to death, which is good. Like I've seen it work for people here and there. Very rarely, but I've seen it work. But I'm like, I don't feel like that's a full artistic life. And I feel like only just now are people starting to expand and be like, oh, I'm going to do that metal record, but then I'm going to do this chill record. And then I'm going to do this like soundscape record. Like the artists that I respect the most are the ones that are able to do that. Like, you know, the people that I adore and look forward to their work the most is like Trent Reznor, mm-hmm. Robert Smith, Danny Elfman, you know, Maynard from Tool, Chino Moreno from Deftones. I look forward to their work because they're always pushing into like new boundaries. And I don't see very many female artists doing that. Mm-hmm. I wish they would. The only one that I know that does that is Chris from King Woman. Mm-hmm. She'll push and do different genres. I think she's got like 4 projects she's juggling right now. Like there's like King Woman, there's Dalmatian, and there's Sugar High. You know, she does all these different things, and I'm like, that's the way to do. Like, I'm an artist. I have ADD. I want to release different kind of things too. Yeah. But the difference is I put a lot of it under my own solo name. Like if I made it, it's solo, you know, mm-hmm. So, but if I'm collaborating, it can be something else. But, yeah, I'm just always looking forward to like new artistic challenges and just to make the statements I want to make. And just, I think, it's all a quest of self-discovery more than anything else. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, obviously I hope that people can listen to it and identify with it, or listen to it and maybe it puts a mood or a vibe to something they haven't been able to express before on their own, or something that confirms their feelings in some way. That's what I'm looking for.
That's awesome. All right. My last question is, if you could give one piece of advice to an artist who wanted to pursue a career in music, but particularly for our metalheads out there who really love metal and want to try to pursue a career in it, what's that one piece of advice that you would share?
Oh, it's hard to say one piece of advice. I actually have a lot of advice for you, but
one of the things that you would
one of the things, sure. Other than know somebody with some money that can pay for you. Or I guess, like, you know, people always think that like your career is like this, mm-hmm. you know, when really your career is like this. You know, it's really, a lot of it is going to be up to you, especially because the industry is this like weird vacuum right now where it's anybody's game, and as you have an audience and someone who, and people who give a fuck about what you have to say, like that's all that really matters, is building your audience and like connecting with your audience. Like what's the point of music if there's no one listening to it? Like, it's that if a tree falls in the forest type thing. I mean, I'm going to go even more existential with it and say, like, it all doesn't really matter, does it? If you want to break it down into, like, the scheme of life, it doesn't really matter. But if it matters to you, that's all that matters. That's it. It has to matter to you. If it's not fun, don't do it. You know, music's supposed to be fun or exciting or a release or something. I feel like there's a lot of people who get involved in metal because they want to emulate their idols, and like that's like the baby step on the journey, is that you see someone else doing it, so you want to do it. But ultimately, it's about just learning who you are and like what your place is in the world, or if there is a place. You know, it's more about self-discovery than I think people care to admit. But you really got to love it, because if you don't love it, other people won't either. And if you don't love it, like, the lifestyle is hard, you know? So it takes love to complete the task you wanted to complete. It takes love to seal the deal. Or else, if you're just doing it because you get off on what you think your idols feel like when they're doing it, it's not going to be enough. It's not enough. So, yeah. That is probably the ultimate piece of advice, is that, you know, it takes, it's going to take your whole being. It's a devotion, you know. It's at least to me. So if you're serious about it, then it'll love you back.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on. And you'll definitely have to come back when your one of your many albums that you're putting out next year comes out, and tell us about it.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.